Hi, welcome back. I'm glad you could join me today. This is the painting I'm going to demonstrate today. So let's rewind time and get started. Today I'm going to do a demonstration of Bob Ross's painting called Mountain Reflections. It's from season 12, episode 2. I already have my canvas covered with liquid white to save time. Okay, I'm going to start with a little bit of phthalo blue, and I'm going to mix a little bit of midnight black with that, just because I want a little bit darker in the corners. Reaching down for a little more phthalo blue and black, and just make some crisscross motions. And as you go down, the liquid white that's on the canvas is going to mix with the paint on your brush, and the sky is going to get lighter toward the horizon. Feel free to switch your hands if your wrist gets tired. Okay, then take a clean, dry brush and just smooth this out with some nice horizontal strokes. And I'm using the 2-inch brush. Okay, now we're going to add some water. I'm reaching back for the phthalo blue and a little bit of black, and I'm going to pull in from the side because I want it to be darker on the side and lighter as it goes toward the center. And I want it to get lighter as I go up. And do the same thing on the other side. Start in the corner and move toward the center, leaving a white space in the middle, and it'll end up looking like a sheen. Grab a little more paint. Now, to bring this all together, we can take the brush we used to pull the sky together and start pulling, smoothing out the water. Okay, now let's put some clouds. In the video, Bob Ross used a 2-inch brush, but you can use a fan brush if you want. I'm going into the titanium white, and I'm putting just a touch of red in that. And I'm just going to start putting in some clouds. Just push it in with your fan brush. Make sure you clean your brush off before you go in for more paint, because you're picking up that blue. Then, with a clean, dry brush, just start to, with the corner and just a few hairs of the brush, just blend in the base of the clouds. Just smooth that out. Try not to knock off your top of the clouds with your thicker white on it. And then gently fluff your clouds. And if you see a hair on there, just try to flick it out. Okay, next we'll start on the mountains. So we want a darker color, so I'm going to take some Prussian blue and I'm going to mix it with a little bit of alizarin crimson because I feel like having slightly purplish base. And we can kind of see what that looks like if we add a little bit of white. You can kind of see what it's going to look like. Looks a little blue, so I'm going to put a little more alizarin crimson into it. And I think I'll even put a little bit of Van Dyke brown into that. Okay. Clean your knife off and just get a little bit of that dark paint and just decide where your mountain is going to be. And just push it in, focusing on the top edge of the mountain, pushing it right into the canvas. And I think maybe I want this to be a little higher here, so you can adapt as you go. Put in the basic shape of your mountain. And I think I'm satisfied with that. So now take your 2-inch brush and just pull the paint, move the paint. Because it's mixing with what's already on the canvas. Just pull it down. At this point, you can start to think about how you want your mountains angled. Make sure your brush is nice and clean and just blend the base of the mountain. And then you can tap to kind of make it misty. Next, we're going to put some snow on the mountain. So we're going to go back to our knife and we're going to mix up some white with a little bit of bright red, because I don't want the snow to be completely white. Okay, let's see what this looks like. Clean your palette knife and take a little bit this paint, make a roll of it, and then gently apply it, allowing it to break as you move the knife downward. So what you want is for the paint to pull apart. And this is the highlight side of the mountain. We're going to put the shadows in a minute. Okay, now I'm going to mix up a shadow color. I'm going to use titanium white, phthalo blue, some alizarin crimson, because I would like it to be a little purple looking. That looks like it might work, so let's put some of that on. And now for the shadow, you want to move your palette knife in the other direction. Sometimes to get in the little places you have to use the little short end of your palette knife. And where you think you need to put some highlights back in, you can go ahead and do that. I think I'd like to have a little bit of a brighter spot here. And if there are any high areas of your paint that look like too much like you've maybe put on icing on a cake, you can very lightly with a fan brush just knock it down. Okay, then we'll go back to a clean, almost clean, dry 2-inch brush. Ideally, it would be clean. And let's tap the base of the mountain to make some mist. I'm going to have it a little misty, just help blend things in a little bit more. And then you can lightly, very lightly brush up in the direction of the lay of the land. Okay, I think I'll blend the bottom a little bit more. I want that to be a little more misty. Next, I'm going to put a more forward scene, some bushes. So let me mix up a color that is still dark, but that has some green mixed into it, because we're getting closer to the foreground, so the colors should become less blue. So I'm going to mix some Van Dyke brown in with there. Okay, I'm going to use a 1-inch brush for this and pull in one direction on the paint, and then turn your brush around and then just go for it. Put in some bushes and trees. And reload your brush as necessary. Then take a clean, dry 2-inch brush and think about where you want the reflections to be, where the water meets the land, and just pull straight down. And then go sideways, horizontally, to distort the reflection a little bit. Now I'm going to take a clean 2-inch brush and put a little highlights on these bushes. So I want to thin the paint down a little bit, because a thin paint sticks to a thick paint. So I'm going to take some liquid white and put it on my palette here, because I think I'm going to need some of this. Leaning toward just a lightened up sap green. So I have a thin sap green here, thinned out with the liquid white. And let's see how that looks. So again, I'm going to pull in one direction to load the brush, and then turn it around, and then lightly push into the canvas. And since it's not showing up very well, I'm going to add a little bit of yellow into that and a little more white. Pull the brush through and add some highlights. Next, I'm going to put a little water line in. So I'm going to use a little bit of the dark sienna with some of the titanium white. Maybe I'll even throw a little bit of that purpley color in there. And just take a roll of that and just put it in. rub it in horizontally where you want that water line to be. Make sure it's horizontal. Okay, now we'll put in some evergreen trees and some bushes. I'm going to use this dark color again, but I'm going to put a little more green into it. We're getting closer, but I still want to keep it dark. I think I'll use my old dirty fan brush. Get both sides covered, and then try to get a chiseled edge. And let me start with a tree right about here. So you take the corner of your fan brush and you can either push down if you want the branches kind of down, or push up. You want them up. That looks like it needs to be a little darker. And I'm going to put a couple more trees in. Now I'm going to go to the right side, because I think I'd like some trees over there as well. Maybe I'll put a taller one. And it doesn't have to be completely full, because sometimes branches are irregular. And you can also start thinking about how you want your lay of the land, if you want. Let me reload my brush. I think I'll have another. And then I think I'll have a big bush here. Before I get too much further into the foreground, I'd like to put the indication of some tree trunks. So I'll take a little bit of, well, let me take some of the dark sienna and just keep it marbled. I'll pull the knife through, get a roll of paint on there. Then I can go up here to the tree and sharpen the tips of the trees. And also, at the same time, put the indication of some tree trunks here and there. And I can put some sticks and twigs in here. And while I'm working on the trees, I'll take a clean fan brush and put some highlights on those trees. Just a little, because I kind of like having them dark. And I'm just going to lightly put a few highlights here and there. I'm loading the brush. I probably have a bit too much paint on there, as you can see, but I'm getting it to a chisel, and I'm going to carefully and lightly touch to get some highlights. It's always good to clean your brush before you reload, because it does pick up some of the dark paint underneath. The sun's really hitting this one. It's okay to have some stand out more than the others. And this tree will be a little bit more in shadow. Okay, next I'm going to go back to my dark color and start to put in some land and reflections. So I'm going to load the brush with this dark color and just start putting in the land. I haven't decided which will be reflections yet, but we can decide that in a minute. Okay, now I think I'll put in some shadow areas for the bushes that will be in front of the trees. So let me get a little more paint mixed up here. This is fairly dark. And put a little blue in there, a little more brown. Pull my brush through in one direction and turn it up, and then push up, and we get some bushes. We're going to do the same to the other side. Just pull the brush through the paint one direction, turn it over, and pushing in some shadow areas that I'll highlight later. And now I'm starting to think, well, maybe these are going to be reflections here. Maybe I'll have some reflections here. So I'll take my 2-inch brush, preferably clean and dry, and start to decide where the water meets the land and pull straight down. Then we can go horizontally and distort that a little. Same for the other side. And go horizontally to distort the reflection. And now I'll highlight these bushes with some varying colors. Let's say it's fall, so maybe I'll add a little bit of, maybe I'll put a little bit of red in there. But first I'll start out with some yellow. And because that's not coming off the brush, I'm going to add a little more liquid white. There we go. Now it's getting nice and thin. And while I'm at it, I'm going to mix up some with a little bit of alizarin crimson in it, so we can get a nice variation in color. Maybe I'll put a little bit of dark sienna in some of it. And let me pull that brush through now. And there's some nice orangey color. And make sure you put some down into the water as well, because there's going to be reflections there. And let me grab a little bit of this bright red Maybe we'll make one bush just a little brighter. And make sure you throw in the reflections. Okay, now take a clean dry brush and we're going to touch up these reflections just lightly, very lightly, very lightly. And then move your brush horizontally to give some distortion. And then to finish this off, we need to put a little bit of land, a little bit of shoreline in here. So I'm going to grab some of this Van Dyke brown and start to put in a little bit of a shoreline. A little bit of dirt to hold things in. Now I'll mix up a little bit of highlight color so we can highlight the ground. So let me grab a little bit of this previous mixture I have going here. Darken it up just a little bit. Keep it marbled. Take a roll of paint and just very lightly put some highlights on your shoreline. And lastly, we can go ahead and put in a water line. And that might be a good color for a water line. On the left side, the water line. Okay, so I think we just about have a done painting, as Bob Ross would say. I'd like to wish you happy painting, God bless, and I'll see you next time.